for?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and record this just so you know. But go ahead.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. So as far as so everything you did was fine. It was a little. There was some weirdness. I mean, you named one branch. You named one branch like feature curl, and then the other one was like feature curl 85. Was that intentional? Was the number on the end intentional?
The number was intentional because the number was the issue number in GitHub.
Ah, okay, I got you.
Right. So I was like, do I name this thing or do I just?
It's fine.
And I tell you, I slept well last night because I knew I was going to get something done.
Yeah.
But just for workflow and
that's the important thing. Yeah. So I'm very like for whatever we do on remote gig, I'm very informal. I mean, I'm assuming. Well, I don't know. Had you had any Git experience prior to Vets Who Code, or is basically everything you're doing sort of based on what you learned with Vets Who Code?
Yeah, I mean it's Vets Who Code because the only stuff that I've had is my own, where I just git add, git commit, git push, right? So reaching out to another repo
is a whole other
why the question came up, right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So what I would do is this. I would say just like so let me give you big picture, then we'll talk about how we can do things with remote gig. Every organization is going to have their own protocol with regard to feature naming, branches, and all that stuff. Vets Who Code does have a certain way they do it, and that's just sort of internally. Folks get together. To be honest, it's not even folks get together. Usually it's whoever the senior engineer on the team is, he's the one that starts things, and he generally tells people, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And it can be a conversation. I mean, it's not, but most developers are pretty pragmatic, and as long as they know that, okay, this is how we're going to do it, you just do it, as long as there's no confusion. As far as for remote gig, and then we'll see what happens with Recruit Tracker, because that's obviously we'll maybe internally or sort of in our small group be doing some stuff, but then like once we go live with it, we'll probably put it, assuming we're going to actually use it, it'll go in the Vets Who Code GitHub repository, and then you may have other people committing to it, so we might need to be a little more formal with how we do things. But for me, what I'd like to see is just name the feature branch some branch name that makes sense. That's generally how I do it. Either that, or I mean, another way to do it. And again, and I'm not a Git. I'm not a very sophisticated Git user, just because I've only worked on small teams and I haven't worked on a true enterprise environment. But I've worked with folks who, you just sort of, you just have a Greg feature branch, and you just sort of constantly make commits there, and I just can do the merges and the pull requests from that single branch. So any of those things is fine. I would say probably the way to do it would be to give a feature branch. Yeah, I mean, the ones that I gave you were fairly trivial, right? I mean, they weren't real. I mean, it was more just like
very low threat.
But so I would say, there may be if it's a more sophisticated feature branch that's going to have multiple commits to it, in that case, it makes sense to me where you would give it a logical name. So if we're going to refactor the jobs controller, let's say, you might call it, refactor _jobs _controller, and you would just sort of work out of that branch.
Okay.
But and like any, like you said, I'm that way with remote gig over the years. If I'm the only one making commits to it, I'll just push straight to master. I don't even mess with feature branches. I've used that application over the years when I mentor folks, though. So now that you're going to be making commits, and hopefully other folks will too, now I'll get back to if I make any changes, I'll create feature branches, and we'll do it that way.
Okay, thank you for explaining that and going through that. I just want to make sure I'm meeting your expectation there.
Yeah, no, and it's fine. Yeah, but that is a good point. Again, every organization sort of has their own protocol for how they do it and naming and stuff like that. So, okay, there's that. It may be worth doing, let's do an update to Rails, because I noticed there's a few things. And in fact, if we look on the GitHub page, so first off, I pushed all the changes you made. So if you've been to the live site, I got the certificates situation straightened out. So remote gig.locklear.me runs now. Let me go back. Yeah. And there's all kinds. I mean, this is a nice little app in that, I mean, there's enough little bits and pieces there to keep us busy. So there's plenty to work on and experiment with there, in addition to whatever we do with Recruit Tracker. But if you go to the GitHub profile, so if you go to the GitHub repository on GitHub, can you see that you get the we found potential security vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, and if we do, so go ahead and do the C dependent bot alerts. And then notice, can you see those issues there? In fact, I'll share my screen just so make sure we're on the same page. So, GitHub added this feature, a couple of years ago now, where essentially it looks at your gems. And let's see, we haven't talked a ton about gems, so this will be an opportunity to talk about that. It will, GitHub will look at your gems, and it knows, gems are, again, pieces of code that you can add to a Ruby application. And of course, they're version controlled. All that stuff lives in rubygems.org. So GitHub obviously is tied in with rubygems.org. It knows what the current version of things should be. So when anything that's in one of their repositories, any Rails app or Ruby apps that use any gems that are in their repositories, if they become out of date, then they send an email. You probably don't. I don't know. Now that you're a contributor, you may get some notifications about any gems as they come out of date. But anyway, these are here. So this is a whole thing, keeping your apps up to date. And this is not a Rails thing, right? This is well, I mean, all applications, maintenance is a part of it. But I mean, I've talked to, the only sort of exception, or I say it's an exception, but I know the Windows world has much less of these from a development standpoint. In the Windows world, like the Windows administrators can keep their, I think this is the way it works. I don't know enough Windows guys who are doing .NET and that kind of programming to know. But the sense I get is the Windows administrator keeps servers up to date and those packs up to date, and developers have a lot less headaches and worries with things being out of date. Now
so it's all behind the curtain.
Yeah, which is now the downside. Obviously, there's the flip side of the coin for everything like that. The downside is number one, it costs money. You're not doing that development for free, and then you don't have the breadth of gems when you look. And this is true for open source projects in general, whether it's Ruby on Rails or Python and Django, or obviously with the whole Node ecosystem. Now there's a ton of just interesting things out there, but it's like anything else though. There's some good code and bad code, and even the good code is, like Node is JavaScript is great, but geez, it's like again, we'll go through the Rails update process here so you can see it, but my sense is, well, in fact, I know because I've got a few pet projects I've done with React and Node, and I mean the updates there, I think it's worse than what it is in the Rails world as far as trying to keep stuff up to date. But that just is what it is, and it's a part of the job. So, but just know that it's a whole thing. So with that being said, let's have you open a console. Let's open up the app. open up remote gig in your terminal and share your screen, and I'll let you do the update, and then you'll make a commit. This will be a feature branch, just like the other things that you did, and then you can make that commit, and I can merge it to master and deploy it.
Okay, so interestingly enough, I cannot see those securities.
Okay, you don't. Okay, yeah, and I was going to say, I was kind of thinking, I was kind of thinking it's probably just the owner of the repository, because you don't want. I mean, I wouldn't want to go looking at other people's repositories and see if they have security vulnerabilities, right? You don't want the public being able to see it. So it's probably just the owner of the repository, which is me.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm in this, and I think what I want to do is pull down the code to update it.
I like to do first. Well, I like to do get branch first. I always do that just to sanity check where I'm at. Okay. Make sure you're in that master. So I would go ahead and change to master.
No, I want to do get checkout.
Yep. And then now you'll do get pull and write the merges from your changes that I made. You should get those. Yep, that looks good.
Yep. Okay.
And then what we can do is, so generally you're just going to do bundle update, and that will grab any so what that does is, so well, yeah, go ahead and run that, and we'll talk about it. What this does is looks at your gem file, and we'll open up Rails maybe. So you can see it's going through now. You can see it's installing some stuff. So the fetching and installing the green stuff are gems, any gems that there are available updates for. And when this stops, let's have you open up your ID of choice, and let's just look at the Rails app.
This is very similar to the wonderful lesson that I've learned about npm install or yarn install.
Same thing.
I'm bringing it all down, and then I'm fighting it because I didn't figure out what the heck was going on, and then it was.
So at the root of your Rails app, you've got a gem file.
A gem file.
Let's go find that.
Okay.
It's the gem file.
Here, okay.
So this is, every Rails app has a gem file. It lives at the root. And again, this is this convention over configuration that we talked about. And it's really nice. If I get a brand new Rails app, usually one of the first things I do is just go to the gem file and look and see what's there. And this sort of gives you the lay of the land. It's sort of like looking at the spec sheet for your new car. I can look at if it's a manual or an automatic transmission. I can see what the engine size is. I can see if it's got GPS. Sort of tells you. So just looking through here, if we scroll down, I see the PG line 13 is the PG gem, which is Postgres. So I know I'm running, in this case, I know I'm running the Postgres database. I see the Rails version right above that, version 6.0.
Yeah. Okay.
And so some of this stuff is there by default. We'll probably create some new Rails apps from scratch, just so you can see, but the gem file is there by default. And a bunch of this stuff is already put in there. Things like Coffee Rails and Turbo Links, those things. I won't go into those. You can do more research if you want to reread about those. And then, so if we scroll down, jQuery Rails, that's pretty standard. Twitter, see, like I added that. The Twitter gem I added, that's what does the nightly tweets and interfaces, I think, with the Twitter account we've got set up. Access taggable on, does the tags feature for the app. You notice all the jobs has tags associated with them.
Okay.
Then there's just a handful of other stuff. Just, MailJet is the mail. When you sign up for a new account, you get an email notification and all that stuff. I think MailJet's what I'm using. So anyway, just the gem files are just obviously a very important piece. And we'll probably be adding, I'm sure, in apps we build, we'll be adding some gems and updating those. And so that is what that does. Go ahead and go back to so we can see your file, all the files on the right side or whatever. And just so you know too, notice there's a gem file scroll gem file and gem file.lock. That gem file.lock is sort of the locked version of the gem file, and it just I think it also shows the dependencies. So the way this whole gem ecosystem in Rails is set up is people write gems. They often include other gems as required when they install their gem.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to make something up. Let's say we were parsing we were going to write a gem to parse some text to look for military terms. Let's just say, again, I'm just making something up. Well, there's already a Nokogiri is a gem, a very common gem that does general text parsing, and we would probably want to build on top of that. So we would probably make that the Nokogiri gem a required gem for our gem. And so that's sort of what gemfile.lock does, is shows the specific versions of all the gems that are in the gem file, in addition to, I think it has the required or the dependent gems. I should say. I'm probably not 100% right on all that, but I think generally that's what the gemfile.lock does. But just know that, so generally you don't touch the gemfile.lock. I mean, there's times when you might need to. I've had times when something's not playing right and not working right, you may need to go in and edit. But generally you only modify the gem file. And when you update, for instance, if you add a new gem to the gem file, when you run bundle to update your app, then that bundle command actually updates the gemfile.lock.
Okay. So do not touch.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what.
Generally, yeah. Right. I mean, you'll get to, if you go on to do great things in Rails, then there probably will be times you will, but at that point you'll know enough to know when you should or should touch it. But yeah, certainly at where you're at right now, yeah, you don't want to touch it. And it's not really, it's not like a big deal if you do, because really when you run bundle, it's going to go back to the gem file, look at the gems you've got there, and then it's going to update the gem.lock file. So it's not like it's going to ruin your world if you do. But okay, so let's go back to your terminal now. So we ran bundle update. Notice we got all those green messages where the gems are updated. So if we do get status now, we should see some changes there. And so now notice we see our gemfile.lock was updated. So now if we do get diff, I think that'll show us what changed. So we can see here our gemfile.lock file was updated. Now again, our gem file is not going to change because those are the sort of active gems that we know we're using. But so the other thing is, if we looked at our gem file again, sometimes there's a specific version of a gem listed, but more often you'll just list the gem name, which means just give me the latest version of the gem. So that's what bundle update does, or you can just run bundle for sure. Bundle and bundle update are the same thing. When you run bundle, it's going to go out to rubygems.org, get the latest version of the gem. So that's what we're seeing here, is these gem versions have been updated. And in fact, if we go, I'm looking at the security alerts in GitHub, and we had active record, action pack, and mechanized there. And sure enough, we see active record is one of the gems that was updated. We see action pack there too. So it's going to take care of all those. It's going to take care of all those updates for us, in addition to the other gem updates that it found. And I think GitHub only shows the sort of core, sort of important gem updates or anything that's a sort of a security issue. There's probably some secondary, lower level gems we're using. There were updates available for them, but they weren't security issues or anything like that. So that's why they didn't show up in GitHub. Okay.
And so what we've done here, by me pulling down the updates, pulling down the most recent version after you did the pull request to fix those two issues, what I've done now is gone into the repo and I've pulled down the latest updated version of the software, then ran bundle install, which reached out to grab the gems that are updated. So what we're doing is fixing any of those security dependencies that you saw previously. Is that
right?
Am I on
Yes.
spot here?
Yep.
Okay.
In addition to any other gems that needed to be updated to. I mean, GitHub was only showing 3.
Yeah, right.
GitHub was
okay.
only showing 3 gems that needed updating, but I think we got more than that. In fact, if you hit your space bar here, I think you can go a page at a time. And
yeah, it'll
active view, active job, Faraday, Capistrano. So those are all things, you know, GitHub didn't list those as updates, but they're not security, probably weren't security issues. So that's why they weren't listed there. So you can just hit Q to quit. And then you tell me what we're going to do now.
So with these changes, I got to add that file, the gemfile.lock. So
yep,
but you
want to switch branch. Yeah, you're going to want to change branches first, right? We'll want to put that in the feature branch rather than pushing it directly to master.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to use this same one, right?
I would call, again, let's use a relevant name. I would call it gem updates.
Yeah, okay.
So I would do git
updates.
And generally we like, not anything wrong with the dash, but generally we like underscores in the Ruby world. So
okay.
And I think you need to create, so I think git checkout -b will create the branch.
Okay.
And then if we do, and I always like to do git status each time. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Or get branch. Yeah, that's going to show. We're in this gem updates. So now we can do, and you're right. I usually do git add dot. That's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
And you can just say updating gems.
And then I'm just going to push. Now here is where yesterday I got a little sketchy, but okay. So it connected because I made it yesterday. Yeah.
Let's see where. Push the gem updates. I always get confused. Like I normally do git origin, git push origin, and then the
that remote
branch name. But it did it for us here. So I'm always, I swear sometimes I've done that and it pushes it. It doesn't push it to the right branch, but.
Okay, so out of the terminal, I can just click this and it takes me to it. Right.
And in fact, you can do, I think you can do this pull request if you want. So go ahead and do it.
Okay, so I'm just comparing here. It's going to check. And then I just like to go over and see if there's something, right? I don't know.
Same way too, just to sort of sanity check. Okay, I got everything right. Yep, that looks good.
Yeah, so I could go through and review each and every one of these changes, but with 79 of them, we'll be here till late in the week.
So go ahead, you can go ahead and merge it.
So then I can just merge this one, confirm the merge.
And then I'll let you see what I do on my end. Yep, go ahead. And I usually delete the branches when I'm done, just because they end up stacking up over time. You've got to clean them out.
I just left those. I left those other 2 there until we had chatted about it because I didn't want to. Okay, so
what I'll do now is I'll share my screen. I'll let you see what I do on the deployment side, and you don't. Pretty sure you don't have, you wouldn't be able to do this. You could run the command, but because you don't have the SSH key for the server, it wouldn't allow you to do it. So is that big enough or do I need to make it bigger? Let's see. Is that large enough or do I need to make it? Okay. All right. So, in master, so I'll do get pull. That should grab your changes. And actually, you know what we didn't, the step we forgot to do is we didn't actually check to see if it broke anything, right? We should have ran Rails S. I'll do that now. So okay, so this is a good one. You notice now that you've had bundle updates. When I try to do anything in Rails, it gives me an error because I haven't actually, because Rails knows that there were new changes to the gem file and I need to run bundle to update my local environment to match these updated gems. So I'm going to run bundle. And you're on me. I see your lips moving. You're on mute, so I don't know if you know.
Okay, yeah. So as I went in to check mine, I typed Rails server and it went right to it. So
well, right,
must have been the change there, right?
Well, that's because you ran bundle locally first. You had already updated your local environment, and then I'll run it here just for kicks, just to make sure it's okay. Now, obviously, we're not in a ideal world. We'd have a test suite here. I've got some tests, but it's not very good. I just haven't taken time to run anything. So normally, I mean, there's a bunch of other features and functionality that can break behind the scene, but whatever. That's why apps like this are nice. They're sort of low stakes, and if something breaks, I'll just go back later. We'll just go back in later and figure it out. But I'm running this locally and localhost. Running, spinning. Okay, and I'm seeing jobs. I'll click on a tag, maybe just to make sure the tags load the jobs. That looks okay. Menu looks okay. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to push this. I'm going to stop the server. So we use Capistrano for deployment. Capistrano is a very common deployment ecosystem for Ruby on Rails. It's a gem. Capistrano is a gem. If you go in the gem file and look, you'll see the Capistrano gem, and it's a whole thing, just like everything else is a whole thing. But it's pretty simple. Once it's a pain in the big time to get it set up and get it working right. And I do it so seldom on apps. Like if I was spinning up a new app every week and having to do a deployment on a new app every week, I would know it better. But it ends up being like once every 3 years, I have to set up a new app and set the deployment up. And it is always, every time I've done it, it always takes literally days and days to get it right, because it's just, there's enough little tweaks and features there. But the great thing about it is that's also a bad thing in that it's rock solid. Once you get it set up and it works, it just runs, it just works. And so then when it does break, it's always a pain in the butt to figure it out, because it's been 2 years since you had to go in and touch it or do anything to it. But to deploy, all I need to do is cap production deploy, and off it goes. And it does a whole bunch of stuff. you can Google, you can go look at the Capistrano gem. Of course, it's open source. You can look at the documentation and read, to your heart's content about all the special things that it does. Now, this is also good because you all are getting a look into sort of a roll your own deployment versus what we'll do with the FNG tracker, which is we're just going to go to Heroku with that. So this sort of seeing this side of it will make you appreciate what Heroku does and everything. Now, you still have the gem updates and things like that, but this is an Ubuntu server. I've got it. It's a digital ocean droplet, just like one of their $5 a month droplets that this runs on. And so I've got the app. So basically what this does is, basically the app you see in the local environment is the app that's running on the server. It's just running in a production form. So it's, from a performance standpoint, it's optimized, for production environment and, and all that. So anyway, boom, it's done. As long as I see all green and yellow, the yellow messages are just informational messages. As long as I don't see any red, and I'm, as long as I see all green, yellow, and blue like that, I'm good. So I've made the deployment. Now, there's not anything for us to see on the live server, but obviously it'd be a good idea just to go ping the live server real quick and make sure it loads. But this was one of those, you're just doing updates in the background. There's not necessarily anything to look for other than to make sure it doesn't break the server. So
but maintenance being important, we got some maintenance done so we can have a cup of coffee.
Right. And you can sort of you feel like you've done some work for for the day, not just have a cup of coffee. Maybe you just take the rest of the day off because you feel like your app's up to date. Although I will say though, this many a Rails dev you do always sort of hold your breath when you do this because
I was there. I was looking for the red.
Well, yeah, and when stuff blows up, it ain't pretty. When you're at this level and it blows up, it's not pretty. So, but it's a pretty. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and you can always roll things back too. But I mean, usually when stuff breaks, that's why Rails is nice. Many apps that are out there, you've got all these dependencies. You might have some Node and some JavaScript and sort of all of these dependencies, and Rails does wrap things up in a nice tight package, even with the gems that are sort of external. You sort of consider those external. The wiring that keeps all that stuff wrapped together is tight enough that usually, even if a gem blows something up or breaks it, it's easy enough to roll that back, and you can fairly quickly, get your server back up or get things resolved if it does. And I've rarely had something break doing updates like this. The other thing, just talking about this idea of rolling our own server versus using a hosting service like Heroku. Obviously, you have the Ubuntu side. So this is an Ubuntu server, so similar to our local environment where we're running either Postgres or SQLite or whatever for your Rails app. This server is running an instance of Postgres. The database lives there. Everything sort of lives all on this one server. So the Ubuntu updates are a separate piece. Like we just did the Rails app to update the Rails app. Then of course I also have to watch Ubuntu updates. So I log in. I mean, it just depends. There's times where I'll go months. Like with this server, I just updated the Ubuntu side of it, the system itself, but it had been 2 or 3 months since I had logged in. So, but Ubuntu's pretty rock solid too, and for the most part, the updates are fine. But I had one Rails app a few years ago. I went in to did the Ubuntu updates, and it broke either Apache or Nginx. We're running the Nginx web server here. I think that was running Apache, but when I did the Ubuntu updates, it broke the Apache install, and so the Rails app was fine. But since Apache was broke, the web app was down, and I had to spend many hours sort of getting that right. So stuff like that happens. The advantage again to Ubuntu a hosting service is you're only worried about the Rails app. You don't have to worry about any of the system stuff as far as Apache or the web server. And then we won't even get into it, but Rails has what's called Passenger Fusion. That's a separate sort of middleware between Apache and the app. Again, it's one of those things that's rock solid as long as it's running and doing what it's supposed to. But every now and again, you'll have issues with it. It'll break. It's a pain in the butt to get set up and going too, though. But once it's set up, it's rock solid. And generally, you'll go years and you never have to do anything with it. But again, the downside being when it does break, you touch it so seldom. It's it can be a pain to figure out. Okay, questions?
I don't have any.
Let's just do some basic Rails stuff and create some new Rails apps. And I want to see if we can do, can we do side-by-side sharing? Can you share? You go to share your screen and see if you can share your terminal. Zoom has
it tells me I cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing, is the error I got.
Wait, let me see. I was thinking it'd be nice if I could see your terminal and you could see mine. The idea is enable. Wait a minute, like we're sitting side by side, and let's see. Let me go to participants.
So it looks like in advanced I can do portion of screen.
Multiple participants share simultaneously. Okay, so go ahead and try and share your screen. Share your terminal.
Okay, I'm sharing my terminal screen, everything here.
Okay, I'm not seeing it.
You seeing anything on the screen?
Are you seeing my share still?
I am not.
Okay, so yeah, something's not right. Okay, see, I see yours there when I stop sharing. Let me share mine again and see. Hold. How does multiple sharing work?
Is there something I got to do at my end as well?
I don't know. I'm looking. There's a checkbox that says allow multiple. Not participants. Heck, where did I see that? I can't even know where I saw the option at now. Participants. Okay, all else fails. Ask Google. Let me see. Zoom multiple screen share. Share multiple screens simultaneously. So start your Zoom meeting as host, click the upward arrow to the right screen of that, select multiple participants can share simultaneously. This allows multiple participants to share their screen at the same time. Note, Zoom rooms and participants using Zoom mobile app can only share. Multiple participants can share simultaneously. So you see my share now, right? And you're on mute.
I do.
Okay. So if you share now.
Okay, I'm sharing mine.
But you obviously lost mine when you started sharing, you stopped.
I did. I don't see
you lost mine. Yeah, I don't. This allows multiple to share their screen at the same time. Screen sharing screen the same. Any participant, including the host, using the Zoom desktop can share screen, begin sharing, even if someone is already sharing their screen. Depending on their setup, participants will see the following. Participants using dual monitors can see the two most recently shared monitors. I've got dual monitors, but I'm not seeing two shares. Participants using a single monitor see the most recently shared. Participants using Zoom mobile, participants using dual monitors can see the two most recently shared. Okay, well, it doesn't look like that's going to work. So let's just do this. I'll just share mine. You can stop sharing, or yeah, I guess you can stop sharing. Yep. So that doesn't really matter. And let's just work together some, and let's write some code. I'm actually working from my Learning Rails 5 book, so I just want to follow along. And so I'm going to go to my sandbox. So let's do some stuff here. In fact, let me share my entire, because I want you to be able to see my editor too. All right, so let's do Rails new test app. Notice here bundle runs, very similar to what we did with our app. First time a Rails app, a new Rails app is created, bundle needs to run just to make sure all those dependencies are there. Keep in mind too, and we'll do this, that Ruby gems, I think Ruby gems is an actual gem that's installed so you can run other Ruby gems. So it's a weird chicken and egg thing. I don't know which comes first, but anyway, we'll look at gems here in a second too. Like all this stuff here, npm, I think you mentioned node and npm earlier. This has been add a yarn is running here. Notice this yarn command. All that's been incorporated into Rails over the last few years. I think probably starting with Rails 6 is when most of that. So any npm, well, I shouldn't say any npm package out there, but I think it has to have hooks for rails to run. But anyway, there's a set of NPM packages for the most part. Anything that runs in the NPM can run in a Rails environment, although that's not a hard and fast rule. I don't know NPM and Node well enough to know when you can and can't do it, but I know I've added Node packages to my Rails apps before. So you're following along there?
I am, yeah, I'm with you.
It's installing now on your end too? Okay. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time for all this for bundle to run, and then NPM is sort of notoriously slow too. So.
I'm just trying to get my screen beside yours so I can kind of see where I'm doing it simultaneously here, but I'm building at my end as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just hitting right about where you're at. I'm just getting there now.
Okay, we'll give it. Yeah, I mean, sometimes this can, this can be unbearably slow. So if we don't get some movement here, well, you know what? Let's.
It's the standard difference between what people think developers do and what developers do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sitting around
and waiting. Okay, mine looks like done. Mine just sort of popped into. Okay, good. So we're there. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up. Actually, let's change directory and then. So I called this test app. Yeah. Test. Okay. So we'll go ahead and open up an editor so we can sort of watch that. And just again, so you can see our gem file. You can see the gem file is pretty packed out of the box in Rails. Often what Rails will do is will create gems, and the sort of most popular Ruby gems will sort of bubble to the top, and Rails will often incorporate those gems. If they're well maintained, if they're well used, Rails will actually by default add those to these sort of default.
Just organically grown, they end up showing up there. Yeah, cool.
Yep, and it is real cool, man. I mean, you look at, again, I talked about Rails being the gold standard for web apps. It's also the gold standard for, open source, community supported open source software. You can read about, I don't know how much you know about where Rails came from, but DHH is the creator of Rails. He runs Basecamp, and Basecamp was originally was a Ruby app, an internal Ruby app for their company, and sort of Rails came out of them building and maintaining Basecamp, and so then they open sourced it in 2005 or 2004, sometime in there. So, but we're coming up on 20 years here, and the ecosystem's pretty impressive between just the Rails framework itself and then the Ruby gems ecosystem too. So it's kind of cool. So you can see all the stuff here. Notice there's these different groups. There's development tests, development and tests. So you may guess what those do. If there's a gem you only want in development, so only on your local install, you can put those gems, add those gems inside the development group. and they'll load, you'll modify the gem file, run bundle to update your install, just like we did for the other updates we did, but when you push it to a production server, it won't show up there. So often those are maybe debug type gems, or there's just various gems you may only want in your development environment that you wouldn't want on production. So you can put those in those groups. And then the same for tests too. Notice this capybara and selenium, you may have heard those words before. Those are testing frameworks. They're used in other languages and frameworks too, but Rails uses those, and you notice those gems are only in the test group because we only want them there. We don't need them in production or elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and if I'm seeing some differences in between my gem file and yours, that's not to be alarmed. It's okay. It's a version
it should
follies
be,
or something like
but
that.
Right? But I'm curious. So yeah, what differences are you seeing? Because we're running the fact that we're running pretty similar environments, I would think they should certainly be close.
Yeah, so we're right at the same version of Rails there. So when I get down to I've got the mechanized jQueries, given Twitter, Font Awesome Rail, all that stuff from remote. Let me get out of here. Let me make sure I'm in the right.
Yeah, make sure you're in the right. I was gonna say no. It sounds like you're in
because
the
I'm in. I know that I did this. I think I just answered my own question, but I know that. Okay, so now that I'm looking at the right one, let me go back here and make sure I'm looking at the right one. Okay, we are much more similar now that I'm in the right file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously Rails creates its own folder. And again, that's just a nice thing. That's the one of the things I love about Rails is it's a nice, neat package. The structure is there, and it just sort of feels nice. Okay. Any questions?
Do you right now, would you push to your Git repo just to kind of say, hey, I've started.
I would do Git. In fact, let's just do that. Let's do Git init.
Okay.
I would do that. So now our changes are being tracked. But it just really depends on what you're building. For what we're doing now and just sort of a sandbox, we're just sort of having fun. I wouldn't even necessarily have done Git init, but at a minimum, it's sort of good to do Git init just so you're sort of tracking changes. And we may, I don't even know what we're going to do with this app. We'll probably build on it maybe at least over the next couple of weeks. So it may be, let's sort of keep this around, and this can be our sort of play app that we'll play in, because we may just continue to add to it and do stuff inside of it. So in that case, doing Git init is a nice way to start. So in that case, let's go ahead. And so we did Git init. We do Git status. We're going to see all of our junk, all of our new junk. So I'm going to do Git add dot Git commit -m initial commit. Boom. Okay. So Git log. So we've got our initial commit there, and so now we've got a clean Rails app we're starting from with our first commit.
All right.
Okay, you there? Good. Let's do so scaffolding is something we'll talk about. Scaffolding is this idea of generators. Rails calls them generators, and they do just sort of what it says. They generate code for you. It feels like cheating in a way, and I think especially 10 or 15 years ago, it sort of felt like cheating. But the way these frameworks evolved is 20 years ago, people were building apps, and especially people like, from a consultant standpoint, if you're out there pounding the pavement, building new apps for clients every week, you start to see these same patterns you're going through, right? And so this idea of boilerplate code starts to come up, right? And I'm sure what happened is these consultants were building these same apps, on a weekly or monthly basis. And they're like, okay, I'm not going to recreate the wheel each time. So they probably had, sort of a boilerplate app that already sort of had things in place, and okay, I got a new client, I'm going to gather the requirements from them. All right, I'm going to take the boilerplate app that I've got and insert or remove or paste and do what I need to do, and then bam, I can spit this out quickly. Well, Rails is sort of an evolution of that thought, and it allows you to do it sort of on the fly. So just creating this initial Rails app, let's go ahead and do Rails S. And then we will pull up our server. I'll drag this down. So we've created a new Rails app, haven't done a thing, but quite a bit is in place, right? We've got the scaffolding or the guts or the wiring, if you will, for this new app. We've got a web server that runs. Puma is the web server that sort of comes included by default with Rails. So you've got your development environment already set up for you, and we've got our sort of standard web page here. Okay, so that's just a good sanity check to do, that we know that Rails runs. Okay, no biggie. Let's generate some stuff. We're going to start with our controller. So I'm going to do Rails G controller. Hello, and I'm going to call it, I guess we'll call it index. And I'm going to hit return. Let me know when you're there.
I am there.
Okay.
I've got a list of created routes and pages and invocations.
Yep. So we noticed that first thing we did, we've got a hello controller here. This name, this hello in front of the underscore controller, that was because we named it hello up here. If we just said Rails G controller blah index, this would be blah underscore controller. So I just want you to see the wiring that's sort of in place there. Same thing with this this route hello index. Again, everywhere you see hello here, everywhere you see hello, that was based on this name that we entered for the controller name. We were giving the controller a name, and then we're giving the controller an action. So essentially what we're saying is, Rails, I want you to generate, that's what the G is. You can type out the word generate if you want, but G does the same thing. Rails, generate for me a controller. We're going to name it hello, and its action is going to be called index. And in fact, if we go to our app and we go app controllers, hello controller. So that's our hello controller. And then if we look at this, we see we've got hello, the class name is hello controller. And then we've got this def index. This is what Rails refers to as an action. More generally, sort of general software development, you could consider this a method of index. In addition to this, our route is going to be in config routes. And notice it gave us this get hello slash index. Now, what does all that do? Well, if we go to our app and we restart our, so I'm going to go ahead and start a new terminal here. So generally what I like to do is I'll open up two tabs. So I've got another tab that's going to be running the server. And then I've got another one, because you'll often need to run console commands and do things. So it's nice. Yep. Just go ahead and have, now there are times, just be aware, you'll need to restart this server depending on the change that you're going to make. Generally, if it's a class change, I think you need to restart the server, but controller changes and other things it'll pick up. You don't have to restart it. But if we restart our server, we refresh, nothing's changed here. But notice again, we talk about our routes. This route was added. So what does that mean? Well, a route is just a URL. So if I actually copy this and paste it in, I should see that this is going to load there. All righty. So we've got a valid route here. I mean, just to sanity check this too. I mean, if we do like that, we're going to get a routing error. So not all routes are valid. So the reason this works, why does this work? So let's go back to, pull up our document that has our request. As our request response cycle. So browser makes a request. Let me get this in here. Browser makes a request. So if I refresh, that's essentially what's happening. I'm making a request to the server for this route, hello/index. Goes to the controller. Our controller is this controller here. Any model or database calls that it needs to make, it's going to make those. In this case, there are not any, right? We've just got a blank controller action, which is index. So nothing happening here. So controller is going to pass it on to the view. And then that view is going to be returned back to our browser. So let's go ahead and let's look at our view while we're here too. So if we go to apps.
And so we stayed inside of that, from that model, that picture there, we just stayed inside of that triangle. We went right to the controller, to the view, back to the browser.
Yep, that's exactly
right. The idea there is that kind of separation of concerns.
Yep, we didn't. We sort of stayed in this circle. We're not going out to the model. Now
right.
we will, right? We certainly will at some point, but right now we're just in this type triangle. And again, if we go to our view, so this is going to be an apps views hello. This is the same text we see here in our browser, right? And just to like,
and
so
that
we're not lying.
View, yeah, and that view was built when we did the Rails generate controller. Is that when that view was built?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's
in fact, if we go here, we see it there. It created that file for us. This is our ERB file we talked about. This is the views that Rails uses. And again, just so we know we're not lying, if I update this text here to high mark, and then I go back and refresh, notice I get high mark here. So again, just think about this little browser makes a request, controller, it verifies the route. We're not really seeing the route, but if we wanted to, we could stick a sort of call to the routes.rb file. In fact, that's really the first thing. You know, if I could go in and modify this picture, I may go in and update it. So I can have that our routes.rb is here. The very first thing that happens is based on this URL, when it hits your Rails app, this routes.rb file, it checks to see if it's a valid route. And again, if we put something like that, it automatically says up, it goes to our routes.rb file, fails right there. It's not a valid route, so I'm going to go and fail.
Right.
All righty, I'm going to honor our time. Go ahead.
I'll save it for next week.
You sure? Okay.
No big.
I may, we'll just sort of do some little stuff like this along the way. I mean, this is simple, but it gives you, if you really want to dig into the guts of it, this is the best way to do just little baby steps like this. And I to me, this is the best way to learn. Is we're doing this big stuff with remote gig, right? We've got a whole app there, but so we're doing some big things there, but we're also going to do some little things here. And hopefully you're sort of, one way to look at it is we're at both ends of the scales. We're, more sophisticated, less sophisticated, and we're learning on both sides. And, at some point those will meet together and you'll have the sort of full spectrum of Rails. And
that's exciting. Yeah. I like it.
Good. All righty. I may throw some more out, guys, for, let's see, Jeff, who else is kibitzing with
Fitz. Fitz was going to try and drop in when he could.
He's
so got a really odd.
Yeah, guys, if you're watching and you can follow along, certainly do it. If you can get remote gig running locally. I've got some issues. I can always find little small stuff to do. That would be the best way to start. I can give you something easy to start with, and happy to have you do some pull requests there. So next week we'll do chapter 2 or section 2. And I haven't even been through it yet, so I don't know. I think basically this controller stuff like we're doing here, I think it probably starts off that way. And so we'll keep this little test app that we've got around, Greg, and guys, if you're following along too, let's keep this around, and we'll just sort of use it as a sandbox app anytime we want to experiment with something. All righty, cool.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
I'll see you in Slack then.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.